Okay, in this video I'm going to make the wheel from the Automoblocks T9, at least a simplified version of it that you can see here on the screen. Um, Before you really get into this, in your packet, the 5.2b packet that goes through the different activities we're going to build, you should take a little time to look at page 13. Okay, as I've got here. And look at the diagram of the wheel where you've got these dimensions. You need to take a minute to understand what you're looking at. You can see that I've made some notes out to the side. I'm not going to show you those, but if we take a second and look at those, you've got four concentric circles, basically two pairs that are going to help create the inner and outer walls of this wheel. And this first dimension right here, the 0.440, that one is a diameter. Okay, the rest of these are not diameters, they're just distances between two circles. And so you need to recognize that distance, if you want to think of it in terms of a diameter, would only be half of the difference between diameters, because that distance here would be doubled on the other side of the center if you were to draw a diameter all the way through. This 0.35, for example, this distance here, well then you'd also have a distance of 0.35 over here. So take a minute, maybe hit pause, take a minute, look at this diagram, and you make your own notes off to the side in terms of what the diameters are, or even what the radius is of each of these circles, and be sure that you've got your dimensions right before you begin. Okay, so now that I've taken time to understand what my dimensions are for these four concentric circles, building them is pretty easy. I'm going to start a new part file, start a 2D sketch, and use the circle tool to create four concentric circles. The first one will have the diameter of 0.440. Okay. This will be the inner one, the smallest, is going to have a diameter is what it's looking for right now. I could just click and then resize or dimension it based on a radius too, but if I know my diameter right here is going to be 0.340. Okay, the third one out is going to have a diameter of 1.14. And then the largest, again, I'm getting a coincident constraint so that the centers line up, is going to be 1.24. I'll finish sketch. I will extrude the narrow profiles between the two pairs of circles. The distance of this extrusion was 0.57 inches. There's my first sketch and first extrusion. Again, notice in the browser that the sketch is not showing. That's because it was just consumed by this extrusion. It is nested underneath extrusion 1. Okay, every time you create a sketch, use a feature like an extrusion, it consumes the sketch that it was based on. To do another extrusion, you would have to recreate a new sketch, even if that sketch you wanted to have some of the same geometry. Okay, so next up, we're going to have the face of the wheel, and that is going to be, if you look at your picture, not the full size, not using that outer lip, but using basically this geometry, that circle, and it's supposed to go all the way to the most inner circle. So really I just want a sketch that has this circle and the most inner circle, and I want to get an extrusion. It's going to be a mid-plane, so it's going to go back in a little bit and pop out. So I'm going to start a new 2D sketch, and we're going to sketch on the same surface, the plane, as these faces here of these circles. Okay, instead of making new circles, I'm going to use this project geometry tool to project out selected geometry from another sketch onto my new sketch. So this circle right here I want to project, as well as this circle. I'm going to finish sketch. extrude. I want to choose those two profiles. The mid-plane option is right here. Okay, that means my extrusion is going to go both be forward and backward from the plane I sketched on. And of course, we don't want it to be too thick. We want this distance here to be 0.05. Okay. So lastly, we're going to go ahead and, in terms of creating the wheel, is create out the cutout. And so we're going to do a shape here on the face of this wheel that is going to be cut out, and we're going to create it once, and then we're going to use a pattern tool to repeat that pattern in a circular pattern around this face of the wheel. So we're going to start sketching on this surface. Right click and choose New Sketch. We're going to use our circle tool. Well, actually, before I do that, hit Escape. Let's project geometry again, because we're on a new sketch, and I do want to use that same circle, this outer edge of that face. I want to project that circle onto this new sketch. Instead of recreating it, we can just that's basically like copying it from the other sketch onto this one. Okay. Choose the circle tool. And now I want to get a coincident constraint where the center of this circle that I'm about to create is going to be on that circle that I just pulled into the sketch. Okay. And the radius of this circle is what they're showing me on page 14 in my packet. But what Inventor is asking for right now is a diameter. So I need to be careful and realize that I'm reading a radius off of paper, but Inventor is asking me for a diameter. So I'm going to double the 0.25 radius I see on my paper and put in 0.50 for the diameter. Okay, now I'm going to use the trim tool to cut away the circle, the part of the circle I don't need. Choose OK. And now I'm going to go ahead and use the arc tool to go ahead and make an arc to really cap off these two, where these 2 points are, to make sure this is viewed as a closed-in region. So I'm going to click once here, click once here, get my coincident constraints, make the third point up here on the circle. Actually, it'll be coincident to the point that's the center of, that was the center used to create that arc. And I'm done with the arc tool, say OK. So now I have this shape right here that we're going to pattern around the circle. And so this is my pattern section right here. And we're going to do a circular pattern. And first it's asking for me to select the geometry that I'd like to pattern. And I'm going to select this shape right here. You can see that I just used a tool where I click, hold, and drag to select geometry. And if I click and hold and drag in a direction that is down and right, you will only select geometry that is fully contained within this red box, as opposed to if you go up and to the left, geometry that is not fully contained within this box but simply touches the box will get selected. Okay, so I want to make sure that I only select this. I'm going to close this and just redo it. Circular. Okay, so using this direction where it's a red box, it's a little easier to control and make sure I don't get this whole circle or anything else. So I'm going to choose that. That's my geometry. Now I'm going to switch to the axis, choosing basically what am I going to rotate around. And in our case, it's going to be this point, the center of the circle. And now I can see my geometry is being patterned. Okay, looking at the diagram, I see that my pattern only repeats 5 times. So the number of times you'd like it to repeat, you can put in this window. And then over how many degrees you'd like that repeat to take place, you can change here. 360 looks right, but go ahead and play around with that and see how it changes, just to understand and try to think about how that could be used. Once you have it back to where you want it, which is this, the 5 and 360, hit OK. I'm done with that sketch. We're going to do an extrude cut now to remove material. So choose extrude. I'm going to choose the extrude cut option. I need to choose my profiles and take a little patience to really make sure you select the area you want. That feature. Sometimes it takes a second to get your mouse exactly where you need it to get just the section you want. Again, this one it seems to want to choose the whole face. There you go. So I've wanted to cut out those 5 regions and then say OK. That is the wheel. The last thing you can do is play around with coloring the wheel. You can come up here and look for something that's a little more metallic. Wondering what did I do when I built it the last time. I found something that was very shiny. This was built, it is a plastic. It looks like I used ABS plastic. And then in the second drop down, it's not letting me see this. Machined aluminum. So if you want to replicate what it looks like here, I used ABS plastic as the material and then a machined aluminum look. So we can do that. I can hit A on my keyboard to get back into the A's. ABS plastic. Hit this drop down, hit M to get into the M's. And machined aluminum. Just to get more of a shiny look. And there you go. So go ahead and create your simplified version of the Automoblocks T9 and have fun.